This class is on the topic of balanced scorecards. It falls within the ambit of strategic planning, and strategic planning sets out the vision for the business in the long run. It aligns resources with this vision and specifies the most efficient way forward. So the essence of strategic planning is long run planning. It's looking at the resources available to the business and working out the most efficient way of achieving its long-run objectives. Most importantly, it works out the competitive strategy to be followed in the face of active competition. Businesses, generally speaking, have got competitors. Some businesses are lucky enough to be monopolies, but then again they must be careful not to abuse their position or bring down the wrath of the law. But for most companies, they have got competitors, and strategic planning is working out the best route, the best way of dealing with competitors so as to optimize on sales and generate profits and generally look after the business. Now, to help in the strategic planning process, the Balanced Scorecard approach was adopted, or I should say was adopted by many companies. It's a useful technique. It's simple and straightforward, and it's what we're going to deal with in the remainder of this session. Now, the Balanced Scorecard attempts to assess the performance of the organization against 4 important measures. It looks at the financial position of the business, looks at the financial resources and all of the financial details of the business. It looks at the customers to see what their requirements are and how the market is changing. It looks at the business process and learning measures. So it looks at how the business is operated, and it looks at ways in which the business can learn from the course of the market and learn from the competitors and learn from market research. It's acquiring information. So there are 4 measures upon which the Balanced Scorecard approach rests. So we have our 4 measures. Now, if we combine these, we get the Balanced Scorecard approach, and out of that we get strategy. So we look at the 4 measures. This gives us our Balanced Scorecards and gives us our Balanced Scorecard overall view, which generates the strategy. And of course, when looking at the Balanced Scorecards, looking at the performance under these 4 indicators, we may recommend improvements. It may be obvious to the person looking at the scorecards that some improvements can be made, in which case, of course, just recommendations are suggested, perhaps implemented, and the process is iterated. Now, a scorecard must be assigned against a benchmark. We can only evaluate against something else. In order to determine the performance of the organization, it must be compared with some benchmark. We can't say something is good unless we know what is bad. We can't say a company is doing well unless we have some standard of comparison. And the standard of comparison will be presumably another company. So company A is doing well compared to company B. We can't say company A is doing well in isolation. So generally speaking, it's relative. It's measured against something else. Now, a Balanced Scorecard approach relies on the following information. First of all, it needs the mission statement or strategic plan. It needs to know what the business is doing. What's the core activity of the business? What is the mission statement for the business? What's the business fundamentally trying to do? And what is the strategic plan? What are the current and most likely projections of the financial position of the business? How well is the business doing financially? What are the threats to the financial position? And what's its overall position? How well is it doing? How well are the ratios looking? What's the balance sheet like? What's the return on assets? So some indicators of how well the business is doing. And how well is the work flowing through the organization? How organized is the business? It's presumably performing some task, which is the nature of its business. So how well is it performing the task? What are the problems associated with production, let's say, or what's the problems associated with the throughput of resources through the business? Presumably the business is converting resources from one state into another, and the final state is what is sold. But how well is it transforming the resources? How well is it engaging in the productive system? What's the motivation of the employees? What's the morale of the employees? Are they happy to be working there? Are they depressed? Are they annoyed with the way the business is going? I mean, what's the motivation? And what's the skill level? How well does the business train its workers? Does it have training sessions, and are the workers valued by the business? And how effective is the customer relations management function? How well does the business relate to the customers? And if there are issues, let's say faulty products, how does the business deal with the faulty products? What are its procedures? How does it project itself into the market? How do customers see it? In the event of failure, product failure, how well are the customers treated? So the balanced scorecard approach relies on this form of information. Now, the balanced scorecard approach separates the strategy into 4 points of view. As I said earlier, we've got the financial, the customers, the business process, and learning measures. Now, each of these may be subdivided into the following. There may be internal and external points of view. So we may look at any one of these. We may look at the financial part from an internal perspective. How is the business doing in terms of the viewpoint of the shareholders or of the management? But it could also be looked at externally. Perhaps the market in general would say that the business is not doing very well at all. It could be that internally the management are quite happy with the way it's working, but externally, when it's compared to other similar businesses, it's not doing well. So the first point is there is an internal and external view of these measures. And there's also an objective and subjective view of the measures. Sometimes management may consider that they are doing well, but it's subjective. That's their opinion. The objective measures, let's say the quantifiable measures, suggest differently. It could be that the management say that the workforce are very happy. They love working there. But objectively, if it was tested by outside researchers who go in and speak to the workers and observe the workers and perhaps engage in participant observation, work alongside the workers and see how they really felt, a different picture would emerge. So information is appraised objectively, independent of what people feel, and subjectively, but there are two ways of looking at it. And of course there are also the actual and the expected results, and an analysis of any discrepancies. So we have the four measures, but we've also got different perspectives, an internal and external perspective of each of these. We have the objective and the subjective. We also have the actual, what actually happens and what was expected to happen. It can be applied to any part of it. It could be that the business expected the market to grow by 10%. It actually grew by 2%. And then we would need to know, well, why? Why did this happen? So we're trying to get a picture of the organization from these limited but very important areas. Now let's look at the financial aspect. This includes factors such as operating income, cash flow, return on capital employed, and financial ratios. Now a lot of these topics are dealt with in different videos, and some of them in different modules, perhaps in the finance module. But the financial aspects of the business are important, and they need to be compared with what's happening elsewhere. They must be benchmarked. It must be benchmarked against what is normal for the industry, if that information is available. It's not often that it is, but if it can be found, then the business could be benchmarked to see how well it's doing compared to the competitors. The business process. Well, these include various processes such as production, distribution, marketing, communications, perhaps HR. There are different processes within the business, mostly related to the functional areas of the business. So the business process is also important in looking at the scorecard. It also needs to be benchmarked. How well is the company producing the product? What's its distribution like? Is it efficient? Does it have warehousing and a fleet of vehicles, or is it outsourcing that? Would it be better to outsource it than have it themselves? Next we've got learning and growth. Labour training, skill levels, employee turnover, job satisfaction. These are all symptomatic of what could be right or wrong about the business. Labour training needs to be in place, and the workers need to be involved in the business. They need to be valued as part of the business. If there's a high labour turnover, it means people are leaving on a regular basis. There may be low job satisfaction. Something wrong with the business. But also it's important to, again, benchmark it against similar companies, if possible. And the customer perspective, well, customer satisfaction, customer retention, and delivering quality to customers. So what mechanisms are in place to look at customer satisfaction? Is the business retaining its customer base? Are customers footloose? They could easily switch to the competitors, or are they loyal to the business? What exactly is the perspective of the customer of the business? How do the customers see the business? Now each area of the Balanced Scorecard could be discussed as follows. Objectives. Determine the objectives of the business. What exactly is the business trying to do? So set out the objectives of the business and try to make the objectives clear. Measures. The objectives should be continuously monitored and corrective measures identified to rectify any achievement shortfall. It's important to measure the objectives to see if they are being achieved. There's no point in having objectives if the company is not trying to achieve the objectives. If they're just simply stated as words and written down somewhere and left, it's useless. The objectives should be what the business is aiming at, what it's trying to achieve. Therefore, they should be measured, and the achievements of the business, the actual outcome of the business, should be measured against the objectives to see if there's any shortfall. If there is a shortfall, take remedial action. Identify any targets that were set in order to achieve the overall objective. There might be targets along the way. The objective could be to grow the business by 5% next year. Well, on the way they may say, well, we want to increase production by 8%. Well, that's a target on the way. They might want to increase store capacity by 2%. That's a target. So look at any targets that have been set. Sometimes the targets are set within the functional areas, say production, stores, marketing, whatever. And look at these targets to see if the targets are met. Because if the targets are met, then the overall objective of the business may also be met. So it's important to look at the targets. And it's important to have initiatives. List any action programs that will enable the achievement of the overall objective. Don't just hope it will happen, fingers crossed. It requires initiatives. It requires active management to make the objectives achievable. If the business is going to grow by X% in the following year, then the management must initiate some programs of change, some growth programs, and set targets that are achievable, but which will ultimately lead to the achievement of the objective. Now, the process of constructing a balanced scorecard. The requirements of the overall strategy should be clearly set out. What is the overall strategy of the business? So if that's not known, then the business is not going anywhere in particular. It could be going in circles. So it's important to have an overall strategy, and it must be clearly set out. Secondly, where possible, the strategy, or the strategic objectives, I should say, should be capable of quantifiable measurement. Where possible. Quantifiable measurement is more objective. It's what has been done. It's possible for management to prove what they have done. So try to couch the objectives in quantifiable terms. The business will grow by 5% next year. 5%. It's quantifiable. It's not the business will grow significantly next year, because nobody knows what significantly means. But they do know 5%. That's measurable. So try to set out strategic objectives that are capable of quantifiable measurement. Management needs to set objectives to achieve the strategy. And the objectives should be easily understood. It's important that the workers and the management know where the business is going. Otherwise it's drifting. They must have a clear vision of where the business is going. Constructing and communicating strategic objectives. Well, these should be set out as operational objectives. As far as the workers are concerned, they're dealing at the operational end. They are making a product. They're designing a product, making the product, delivering a product. it's operational. So it's important that the strategic objectives are couched in ways that are easily understood and communicated at all levels of the organization, so that there are operational objectives, and these objectives they fit with the strategic objectives. They're all pulling in the same direction. The objectives, strategic objectives, should be clearly communicated. There should be no doubt amongst anyone in the business of where the business is going, what it's aiming to do. It's aiming to grow by 5% or 10% in the following year. It's aiming to expand into a new market. It's aiming to develop a new product. It needs to be communicated so that the workforce and the management, they will subscribe to the achievement of that objective. And the targets must be achievable. It's pointless setting targets if they're not achievable. If the business is working flat out at the moment, if it's working to full capacity at the moment, and the management then come up with an idea that it wants the business to grow by 20% next year, that's not possible. It's not achievable. Not with the current resources. The business is already working flat out. It's already working to capacity. So how can it grow by a further 20%? It's not achievable. So the targets that are set by management must be achievable. Otherwise, the workers and the management at all levels will not even attempt to achieve what has been set. They know it's not possible. The initiatives set for the achievement of each target must be measurable, must be focused and efficiently executed. So it's important that the initiatives that the management set out must be measurable. Again, in terms of communication, it's not right to simply say to the workers that we want more work out of you, we want more productivity. It doesn't mean very much. It means work a bit harder. It may mean saying to the workforce, we want more output, we need to expand out by an extra 3%. Now that's measurable. Now the workforce can say, well, that's not achievable given the current technology, or it's not achievable given the current amount of capital, or whatever. And a debate may ensue. But at least it's measurable. And they are talking about figures. It's not talking about some fantasy idea that somebody's got. We need to have more output. But how much more output? Put a measurable figure on it. And it must be focused. Can't say that overall the business should grow by 5%. It's difficult to say what that means. Does it mean that the stores should grow by 5%? Or is it that sales should grow by 5%? Or profits should grow by 5%? Or focused? Specify exactly what is meant. And then offer some efficient route to achieve that. There should be feedback and learning, and the process should be monitored. Sometimes the workers at the shop floor end have a lot of knowledge, have a lot of information about how the business is working, because they can see it day to day. They can see problems and issues. Take the feedback and learn from it. Learn from wherever information flows. It may be from the market, it may be through market research, or it may be through feedback from the marketing staff, but it could be feedback from the HR staff about the feelings of the workers within the business regarding some initiative. It can come from many sources. Take the feedback and learn, and then monitor the process. Any changes that are being proposed, monitor them to see if they are being accepted, if there are issues, if people can spot problems with the initiatives. Many business problems may arise because of arrogance on the part of senior management who are trying to bully through changes, whereas perhaps listening and learning may be more productive. Albeit the case that, of course, different people within the organisation may have different agendas. But if the facts are sorted out, then learning and monitoring what has been said and mismatches between desired outcomes and actual outcomes, that sort of learning is productive. Successful outcomes recorded as examples of good practice. Bear in mind that not all good practice may come from senior management. Good practice may come from the shop floor, who organize production perhaps in a way that suits them, but it suits them efficiently to do it that way. It needs to be monitored and checked, but it may be that the shop floor have got good ideas about how to organize production. Failed outcomes should be rectified and serve as a source of learning. Every part of the business is a source of learning. Every part of the business has got a story to tell. So if some proposal has failed in the past, learn from the failure. Why did it fail? And try to incorporate best practice from all the experiences of the past into future decisions. Now, let's look at the benefits of the Balanced Scorecard. Well, it converts a strategy into achievable objectives and targets, which is very important. It's necessary to convert the strategy into objectives, strategies and targets. These have to be achievable. Converting a strategy into non-achievable objectives is silly. It is a ridiculous thing to do. The strategy must be operational. It must manifest itself in operational changes. And the operational changes, when implemented, will lead to the achievement of the strategy. So it must be achievable, and it must be seen and recognized by all who are going to work on it as achievable. If they believe it's not achievable from the start, they're not going to commit to it. It's going to be a waste of time. The strategy, as I said earlier, should be communicated effectively throughout the organization. All who need to know should be informed. Goals and targets are suited to the organization's strategic objectives. It's important that the goals and targets are suited to the organization. This should be realistic, given the amount of capital, given the capacity of the business, given the skills of the workers, given the core competencies, given the size of the market. In other words, the objectives that are set, the targets that are set, or if you like, the strategy that is set, must be commensurate with all of those issues, with the size of the market, with the capacity of the business. And setting objectives or strategies that far exceed the current capacity of the business would be fantasy, a waste of time. Feedback available for strategy implementation. It's important to get feedback, and to get feedback on a continuous basis so that there's effective monitoring of the strategy. The strategy has been designed, it's in the process of implementation. It's important for those who are implementing the strategy to feedback how it's going. What are the issues? What's the problems? How can they be fixed? What does the strategy need? What reorganization does it need? What further capital does it need? Does it mean that the workers have to acquire new skills? Feedback is important, and if the feedback is not worked on, if the management doesn't take it seriously and work on the feedback, address the feedback, then the chances are the strategy will not work. The problems with the balanced scorecard, well, it requires a well-defined strategy. Without a strategy, there is nothing to work on. And businesses vary, and the use of benchmarking may be misleading, and hence the use of scorecards based on the same benchmarks may also be inappropriate. You see, all of what we've just discussed really requires effective benchmarking. They should find comparable businesses and compare the performance of the business with these comparable businesses. That's benchmarking. But there may not be comparable businesses, in which case it may be comparing itself with businesses which are inappropriate. They're wrong. They are misleading businesses. It may be that the business is comparing itself with businesses which are operating in different sectors with different experiences. Although the businesses try to match, it doesn't mean that the businesses are the same. So the process of benchmarking itself must be carefully considered. And even if other businesses are found that are similar, it doesn't mean that the business can get all the information to do effective benchmarking. I mean, there is confidentiality to deal with, and the other businesses are not going to surrender their information easily to a competitor. So there are problems with scorecards. First of all, the well-defined strategy, absolutely essential, and secondly, the process of benchmarking itself may be a big problem. So that's all I'm going to deal with in this session, and that will conclude our talk on the balanced scorecards. So let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.